There was the accidental bombing of the Belgrade embassy, and the North Koreans and the Chinese at that time sort of sang from the same sheet of music. We heard all sorts of anti-American rhetoric from them, and Beijing began to defend and become an apologist for North Korea. I know that hindsight is easily corrected to 2020, but I wonder once again if we had been more astute, we might have saved the world from a situation where now a mishandled North Korea, as I see it, and deeply anti-American factions in the Middle East and South Asia have combined to threaten us with a far greater disaster than we experienced on 9/11. I'm of course talking about the prospect that terrorists get their hands on a North Korean nuclear weapon or North Korean fissile material. It seems to me that is a matter of profound concern to us, and it's where I'm headed in talking about this today. In 2000, Kim Jong-il did go to China. He stopped describing the Chinese as anti-revolutionary and betrayers of socialism. In February, the CIA said China was supplying missile technology. The Chinese, of course, denied it. It's probably not altogether a truthful denial, but anyway, that was the way that things were going. The Chinese were asserting, look, North Korea is not really a threat, and you're simply looking for impunity to be able to attack the U.S. is any country that you wish to, and you should understand that other countries wish to be able to defend themselves. So Beijing was taking that line. As late as July 2001, China saw the development of nuclear weapons by North Korea, as they described it, as undesirable but understandable because of the threat from the U.S. and that it didn't directly threaten China. The U.S. was still seen as obsessed with the proliferation issue. The Chinese thought we simply were over the top. Kim Jong-il had a second visit to China, and trade was greatly increasing. It doubled in between 2000 and 2001 between China and North Korea. For reasons that I have never fathomed, I was invited to speak in Seoul in commemoration of the 10th anniversary of the PRC-ROK establishment of diplomatic relations. Now, my remarks were undoubtedly forgettable, but I do remember these remarks by a South Korean, and I've put them here in blue, saying that China maintained a two-Korea policy tilting toward South Korea during the 1990s, but restored balanced relations with both Koreas by renormalizing relations with North Korea. This is, in my view, an important point. In 2002, the U.S. and China adopted what I now contend is a familiar pattern of behavior. North Korea behaves outrageously, or so Washington concludes. We've all heard many examples of that. Washington justifiably but imprudently reacts to the outrageous conduct. Misunderstanding, uncertainty, and confusion compound the problem. The pattern was evident in the way we confronted the North Koreans in 2002 about uranium enrichment, a way for Pyongyang to circumvent the halt of its plutonium program under the agreed framework. We proved, and yes, we have repeatedly reproven, that the North Koreans are perfidious, insecure, and feel compelled to develop a nuclear deterrent. If our goal is a nuclear weapons-free Korean peninsula, achieved perhaps by persuading North Korea that it would be better off without nuclear weapons, I think our approach might be different. Maybe if the White House had let Jim Kelly, Ambassador Hill's predecessor in spearheading this issue with the North Koreans, negotiate, things that could have incrementally changed for the better. Ambassador Hill later took the approach of seeking explanations for these suspect acquisitions that seemed suitable for an HEU facility such as the one revealed most recently in 2010. And by the way, we did not convince China at the time that we had evidence of the highly enriched uranium facility. The upshot was that the Chinese were sort of vacillating and half-hearted about this issue. So my point here is that how many times do we have to prove that the North Koreans are reprehensible? Got it. I understand the point. My point is, so where do we go from here? As the Sixth Party talks began in August of 2003, I went to the top 10 Chinese institutions focused on North Korea and the nuclear issue. And I'll just run through quickly and show you what their concerns were at the time. They were now beginning for the first time to think that there was a threat to China from WMD nuclear proliferation that terrorists would get their hands on. That it could lead to Japanese and South Korean nuclear weapon development, that a peaceful solution could be found, but that it did not include sanctions. Of course, the Chinese have always been in opposition to sanctions. They said the regime change was not expected. That credible security assurances were needed, when it needed even closer. I can get it a little bit closer here. Let me move this over a little bit. Is that even better now, or is that?
Much better.
That regime change was not needed and it wasn't going to happen, but that North Korea did have real fears of a forced regime change, and that we ought to realize that was the case. And that the Chinese would not support Korean military adventures, that's the Korean People's Army. They did not oppose unification, as many accused them of, but they were not going to impose it in any way on the North Koreans. That they would supply food and energy, which they're still doing, but that North Korea must remain in the six-party talk process. And they reminded everyone that they potentially face an overwhelming refugee problem.